Today's interview is with Eric Herdman. Eric Herdman's a public speaker who also does some coaching as well, and he has a focus on productivity and time management. So it was a really interesting interview. I really enjoyed and got a lot out of it personally. So I hope everyone who listens gets the same. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're watching on iTunes, please give me a 5-star rating if you feel it's worthy. And if you want to go one step further and write me a review, that would be fantastic. It's also available on PODBEAN and Spotify, and also on wrestlingwithrealestate.com. So really great interview. If you want to be more productive, work on your time management, this is definitely the interview for you, and I think we can all work on that. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to choke slam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we have Eric Herdman on the call with us. Thank you, Eric, for being here today. I appreciate you taking the time, and we could have actually done this in person. I didn't realize we could have, with masks, we would have had to wear some masks, but
6 foot apart with masks, but I'm very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you're currently doing?
I am a professional speaker, corporate trainer, keynote speaker, and have been for 24, soon to be 25 years. And normally, when the world is normal, I travel 250 days a year giving presentations, corporate training. I speak to private businesses, large associations, conventions, and large and small groups. I also do some individual and small group coaching, virtual business coaching. So that has been something I've done for probably a decade. But the speaking is something that I've pretty much done my whole professional career on. And occasionally I'll write. I've written 4 books, but mostly I speak on productivity, what most people would refer to it as time management, but really how to optimize ourselves to be the most productive, best self we can be every day.
Absolutely. That's great. That's great. How do you start to get into that? Because I feel like it's not something that you just, you don't decide when you're 10 years old that you're going to be a keynote speaker, right? It's a great job and it's fantastic what you do, but it's not maybe something that you decide at an early age you want to do.
No, you don't, on career day and first and second grade, that's not what you get up and talk about. It's the typical, I want to be a fireman or whatever, doctor, that sort of thing. It was when I was in college that I realized that I really liked public speaking. I took all of the public speaking courses that I could take. I was in Toastmasters. I even did a little bit of the debate team, trying to just get, again, in front of groups of people. So I realized then that I kind of had I guess you call it a knack or kind of a leaning toward that. But it wasn't until I got out of college and I started working in my degree, which was in exercise science, and I started working in a lab. It was a medical lab, but I started doing some of the work that I'd been trained in school to do, and realized that just was absolutely a horrible fit. That as more of an extroverted person, working in a lab by myself in front of a couple machines for 10 hours straight was just not my thing. And it turns out that I was more of an entrepreneur than I really knew I was. And I started a business where I actually stumbled into this, but to cut to the chase, I started a business where I emceed beauty pageants and festivals.
Wow.
Yeah. These junior Miss and Mrs. pageants all across the country. And I stumbled into that. Someone saw me giving a presentation and said, "You'd be great for our pageant," and they invited me. And then that's when the entrepreneurial bug kicked in, and I realized that I could probably market to other pageant directors all over the country and get some business, and I did. And this was back when you would stuff envelopes and you'd fax things out and do all of that. And then I realized that was pretty good, but what if I were to MC these different festivals like the Strawberry Festival or the Pumpkin Show or the 4th of July Festival, because these festivals take place all over the summer and fall. And so I did that. And then after a while, as you can imagine, that has somewhat of a shelf life. It has an expiration date on it. It's a younger man's gig, and it should be. It's the right thing to do, and it was the right transition for me to make into professional speaking. And a friend of mine said, you know what, you'd be great at corporate training with your, you got some education, you got some background, you're good on the platform in front of people. And long story short, here's where I am. Here I am.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. How was the pageant world? Was that a crazy, crazy world?
It is. It's just like you see on some of the shows on reality TV. A lot of the kids, by the way, a lot of the kids enjoy it and they like it. But there are those, as as you see on reality TV, where it's really about the parents and it's all about the parents. But overall, I mean, it was a great experience, and it taught me a lot. And it was at a time when I, needed to learn the platform skills, being in front of a group, and it served me well. And all the people that I worked with and the clients I had then, like I said, when I wrapped it up, I made sure they had replacements and people to audition. And so it was a good transition into the professional speaking. But the pageants, yeah, that was a wild environment to be in.
I can imagine. That was interesting as well. You mentioned about public speaking and how you learned about that. I think to most people, I think that what's the survey that they would they fear public speaking more than they fear death or something, right? Like that, right? But maybe it's
it's always on that list of things that people fear, or the greatest fears or the greatest stressors. It's always on the top 3, it seems like.
Maybe you can help a few people, me included. Despite my performance background, I'm not always the biggest fan of public speaking. Maybe you can give us a few quick pointers, things that you've learned that could help people.
I think there's a couple things I could offer people that they could do right away and turn this into something. And that's how I like my material to be. I don't like it to be something that you have to digest and study and that sort of thing. First thing is practice. And I think that's, kind of an obvious one, but the more you practice, but not just practice like hack away at it and just kind of go half in. When I think of practice, I think of practice perfect. I mean, set up the space. If you're only going to have, 10 feet this direction and 5 feet in front of you, practice in that space. If you're going to be able to use notes, then use notes. If you have to do it without notes, practice without notes. If it's going to be noisy in your environment, practice projecting your voice. So try to match and mirror the environment that you're going to be in. And the other thing that isn't often talked about, but just be curious and be open to mistakes and little things happening. Like a lot of times people ask me, so how are you so relaxed before an event? And one of the things that I'll tell people is I'm just okay I'm okay knowing that something might go wrong. And I just look at it with this curiosity, or would that be neat? If the microphone went out, I could have some fun with that. I might be able to turn it into something. Or if something falls over in the room, and I might be able to play off of that. We might all have a laugh on that. So instead of having this anticipation that turns into this dread and oftentimes turns into anxiety, look at that and how you could use that, or how you could, again, be curious about what you could do with that sort of thing, kind of playful, if you will. And I don't mean that like in a corny way, but just in that curiosity way. Those are 2 things I would recommend to anybody right now that they could do. Again, right away, you could start practicing in the environment, imagining it. And then again, don't get caught up in all the anxiety. Just kind of relax and go with it. And maybe realize that there will be things that go wrong from time to time, but how can you turn that into a laugh or a lighter moment or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, nobody watches someone speak and doesn't think that person is not human, right? That even if you stumble your words or you kind of forget what you're going to say, if anything, it endears you to that audience, I think, because they're going to be pulling for you more to do that good speech.
One of the things that an early mentor told me was, Eric, they're rooting for you. First of all, he told me that. He said, they're rooting for you. They want you to succeed. They do not want to see you have mistakes and have a hard time. And he was right. They do. They're on your side. But the other thing is, he said that they want to see genuine and authentic. So if you flub a word, just flub it and keep on going, and just put a smile on your face and keep on going. And you know what? That lowered the pressure and the stress so much, just knowing that they want a genuine, authentic. They don't want fake and phony and false. They want real.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And get there out and do it, right? Just the more you do it, the more, you mentioned Toastmasters there. That's something I'm going to be looking to join myself, because obviously once everything gets back to normal, but just getting out there and doing it, because once you face your fears, a lot of times you realize, oh wow, this actually wasn't that bad, you know, and you just
and that was, you know, it's a wonderful story that might be a lesson here, but you know, my first mentor, really my only mentor in this, was way back when I lived in Columbus, Ohio. And I went to him and I said, you know, you've been around the block of time. He was a professional speaker. I mean, he was, when I say professional, he was making his income completely from speaking. And I said, you know, I want to do this. He said, the first thing you got to do is get good. And so I said, what's that look like? He said, well, you can't ask for money until you're good. And then you can only ask for a little bit. And he kind of explained what to do. And again, long story short, went back about 1.5 years and met with him. And I'd done a lot of speaking, got in front of a lot of audiences for free. And I said, okay, I'm good. He said, awesome. He said, that's so great to hear, Eric. He said, now you got to get better. And I said, what's that look like? He told me what that was all about, what I'd have to do, and where I would need to take my skills at that point. And of course, then, as you can imagine, I went back a period of time later and I said, okay, I've gotten better. He said, now you got to get great. And so I worked myself up, and so that's just how it went. But you're absolutely right. And the reason I tell that story is because what I was doing, each of those different levels, you know, getting good and getting better and getting great, was about getting in front of people and presenting new content and pushing myself, not just getting in front of more people or being able to even charge a fee. A lot of times it wasn't even about a fee that I was able to take and push to a higher dollar amount. It was about getting better. It was bringing in the better platform skills, the better speaking skills, the better content. It was about making me better, really, so that the audience was getting more out of me, or I was being able to give more to the audience.
That's great. That's great. And it's just like anything, I guess, right? You've just got to, like you said, keep progressing. You know, whatever you're doing, you want to, you know, you start, okay, you're good. Okay, get better. Now you need to get great. And then once you got to great, I'm sure you didn't settle at great, right? You want to get to whatever's next. And it's just like everything.
Next was exceptional. He told me now you got to become exceptional. Yeah. Yeah.
And once you get to that point as well, once you get to that point as well, it's the little things, I think, that make the bigger difference. When you're small, when your level is a lot lower, you've got a lot more room to grow, right? It's easier to go to that next step. But once you get to that top level, it's the tiniest little things that make the difference.
It started off, it was a game, you know, of miles. There were just big swings and improvement. And as you get in those higher levels, it becomes a game of inches where you're just making little nudges, but the ripple effect to your audience, to the people that are, you know, in front of you that you're working with, is huge. So even though it seems like a game of inches, it's much bigger to them.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really interesting. I'm sure that'll help a lot of people, help me for sure. You know, you talked about the main focus of what you do is productivity and time management, even though you don't necessarily call it that.
Right.
Maybe talk a little bit about what you work with people on, and kind of the general mistakes that you see people make, and what people can help themselves. You know, we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are watching this, and kind of they can learn a lot, I'm sure, from that.
I work with most of the groups and people I work with is on how to optimize and bring the best out of them, so that, again, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, because they can serve whoever their audience is. If it's a leader in the workplace, they have to make sure they show up their best self every day, so that they're in a good place, but not only just so they're in a good place, so they can bring the best out of the team of people they work with. And if you're a solopreneur, or if you're just you, and you have to make sure you're doing that, because you have to be ready to help you throughout the day. So if you have a team of people, that's great. You got to show up your best. If it's just you, you got to definitely show up your best, because everything in and around you is relying on you to make those outcomes happen. But what got me into taking this away from the time management label that a lot of people use is because I stepped back and I started thinking about this, that we really can't manage time. We're not in control of time. It is a very valuable commodity, and we make a bad choice, a bad decision with it. It just goes away. I mean, we don't have the ability to bank it and save it and make it up and do it over again. It's just, we've got to move forward. So why not make sure that on the front end of that, we're doing certain things to make sure we're optimizing and squeezing every ounce of oomph out of everything that we do. And so I got away from talking about time management and talking more about how to optimize ourselves for peak performance and how to really drive productivity and what makes things happen. And I ended up focusing a lot on what people can do to set themselves up to have the energy to do the things that they need to do and have the focus, because those two things we're in control of. We can identify when we have high energy and when we have low energy, those natural biological energy cycles. You know, people know right away when I say that, when I'm talking about it, people are automatically thinking I'm a morning person, or I'm an afternoon person, or maybe it's a hybrid. And when I did the research for the book I wrote in 2019 on time, energy, and focus, I discovered morning people, afternoon people, and of course we have late night people, but we also have this hybrid group that has low energy in the morning, kind of in the business morning, you know, that around that 8 or 9 o'clock, that's low energy. But in midday, they kind of pick up their energy and they carry that until about 3 or 4, and then they start to go kind of on a downward. And so I work with people to identify where those are and how to really maximize those, because even very specific inside of a person that's the morning person, there are 3 peaks and troughs that the researchers will help you identify when they do the research on this. They say you're a morning person, but your first highest energy cycle is at 6 a.m. and your second highest is at 8, and then you have another one that's pretty high at 11. So we even have 3 inside of what we would generally call, okay, I'm a morning person, and there's 3 peaks and troughs. And troughs are not like you're losing it and you're going to fall asleep. It's a trough. It's just a little lower than your normal high energy, but still you're in a good place. And so I work with people to take their project work or important phone calls and put those in those peak spots so that they show up the best that they can be. So you don't want to call an important client if you're a morning person at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have control over that and you can reach out at 9 in the morning, do it at 9 in the morning. Make sure that you're in the best spot you can be. And I always tell the story that there are things that we have to do as entrepreneurs and people that are running businesses. And for me, I have to do the accounting. I have to do the taxes, and we have to do a profit and loss. And my accountant always sends the email, okay, it's time to do that again. And you can tell by the way I'm talking about it. I absolutely love it. And what I would do before I really started thinking about the time, energy, and focus, when I wrote the book in 2000, well, I was doing the research in 2018, I used to take that and just go, okay, that's ugly. That's just something I don't want to do. And I'd put it in the afternoon. And I realized that I would procrastinate on that just like everybody else out there. I'd put that off. The other thing is that I'm a morning person, so that's not a good time for me. I'd make a ton of mistakes. You know, that my accountant would send that back to me like it looked like, you know, my second grade math teacher, all marked up in red and you know, the D circled, you know, 6 times, and oh, it was horrible. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. What if I put that work that I'm not good at? I don't like numbers. But I have to do it. What if I put that in the morning? What if I put that at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning when I'm having one of my very high energy cycles? Next thing you know, I did that and I'm getting it done. And instead of taking the full hour and a half that I blocked off to do that, it only took me an hour and 15 minutes. And my accountant, Derek, didn't send it back with a bunch of check marks and errors all over it. I actually improved the quality of work. So I figured, you know what? That's exactly what I'm talking about. That work didn't change. And I didn't change anything with that. I simply moved that into a block where I was at my best. And I was able to do the work. And again, faster than normal and with greater accuracy. The quality of the work was up there as well.
That's fascinating. So a lot of it's about understanding who you are as a person, right? Like you said, it's the morning. Are you an afternoon person? When do you work best, and when can you bang out all the jobs that you need. And like you said, it's interesting to hear you say as well, to do the hard stuff when you're at that peak, you know, because when you're not so good, maybe you can do the easier stuff, but once you've done the hard stuff, the easier stuff is just like that. It's easier. And it's interesting. It's just similar to a conversation I had with someone. It's like, do you focus on your strengths or your weaknesses? No, you focus on your strengths and you get someone else to make up for your weaknesses. And this is kind of a similar point to that.
That's right. I delegate a lot of the, I have to do that bit of the financial work, but I delegate a lot of the other financial stuff, the invoicing and the billing and that kind of work to my assistant, because I know that's not a strength. And I don't want to pollute or cloud my high energy cycles with that type of stuff when she's happy to do it and have that and can fit that into her schedule. So yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Interesting. Very interesting. So maybe you can give us some more. That's one tip, right? Optimize when you're at your peak and do the hard stuff at that time. Yeah,
and that's, again, we normally and very quickly and intuitively and correctly can do that. Right now, your audience is going, I'm a morning person, or maybe I'm that hybrid person. I'm kind of that person that starts off not so good, but middle of the day, I'm good. We do that. But think specifically about when you absolutely have those three peaks of high energy, wherever they are, the morning, a midday, or the afternoon. Think about where those are. But another thing that always comes up is the question of, all right, I'll do that. Or they do it and I get an email that says I did it. And I know where my three high, peaks are in my morning time. But what do you do when you got to get on a call at 3 o'clock and you're a morning person? What do you do? And so I developed a series of what I call force multipliers. Force multipliers. It's things that you can do to yourself to bring energy up when you're not normally in a high natural biological energy cycle. And the obvious, of course, when I ask audiences this, is always, okay, so what are you thinking of right now? And of course, the number one response is caffeine, coffee.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's what I rely on. Yeah.
And that is a go-to for a lot of people. The problem with that is that if you, say, for example, you are a morning person, you're more than likely going to be going to bed a little earlier than an afternoon person or a late night person. So having caffeine, especially if you're caffeine sensitive, too late in the day can have a ripple effect, a negative ripple effect, and interrupt your sleep. So I say, hey, that is a go-to, that is an option, because as you know, there's all these genetic testing and that sort of thing, and we can find out if we're fast metabolizers or slow metabolizers, and a lot of times people know. I didn't win the genetic lottery in fast metabolizers. I have a cup of coffee at 1 o'clock. I'm going to pay for that until 10 o'clock at night. But my mother can have a very strong, almost have to chew a cup of coffee at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and be asleep 15 minutes later. So again, everybody is a little different with that. So I always say, yeah, that is an option, and I explain that. And then people always say, okay, you're right. What other force multipliers are there? Well, there's a lot. Music is another big one. And again, it has very little side effects as far as carrying over. It'll pretty much amp you up and carry you for a little bit, bring your energy up and enthusiasm. And almost you can physically see a change in people. But then as it starts to wear off, you can kind of come back down and normalize. And it's funny you bring that up. I had that discussion in a virtual training speech I did this morning. And I said, so what are you thinking as force multipliers? And I got the coffee and the Mountain Dew and the espresso, and then popped right up the theme from Rocky. And I joked with that person. I said, you're stealing my thunder, because actually that is on my, what I call, again, the force multiplier playlist. It's the theme from Rocky, which is Gonna Fly Now. And then the second, I only have two. The second song is Eye of the Tiger. Apparently I have a thing for Rocky. Yeah. But again, if you look at some of the functional MRI testing that's been done, on athletes and things as far as music eliciting and pulling this out of us, bringing us up, you'll see that those centers of the brain light up with those types of songs. Exercise is another one. And by the way, it doesn't have to be something crazy. It could be taking, we're talking about a friend of ours, Stan Efforting talks about the 10-minute walks. Mm-hmm. A force multiplier could be a 10-minute walk, taking a break, just taking 5 or 10 minutes, a little fresh air, natural sunlight, and movement will do wonders for you. It's almost a reset if you look at how it works with the brain and the body. And then it could be, that's what we call low-level physical activity. So 5 or 10 minutes of, again, fresh air, movement, that sort of thing. But it could also be, I have clients that do, 20 burpees or 20 air squats. And again, it only takes 15 or 20 seconds to do those, but we know that really just amps up the system, and it throws us into the part of the nervous system that really, gets our cage rattled, and we get amped up for that.
Yeah, that's funny. As you were talking then, you were talking about the music. I recently, I'm not a morning person, but I try and get up early because I have a 11-month-old son, so I have no choice really, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I've started doing that as well, just playing music, and it's amazing. It changes your mood. Mine is AC/DC, anything from AC/DC, Thunderstruck or something like that, and I'm a different person, and it's so true. And I also do the walk. I'll just, especially in the morning when you haven't had the daylight, when I go out and I just have, we're here in Las Vegas, so we pretty much every day have sun. Having that sun hit my face and my eyes, it just makes such a big difference, along with some music. And I'm a different person once I've done that.
Well, that's the other thing that goes, in as a force multiplier is natural light. A lot of us working in offices or now, of course, with the way things are, home offices, we have a lot of artificial light. And so getting that natural sunlight, there's two big sets of photoreceptors. There's obviously the eyes, but there's another one right above the thyroid. And just exposing that to some natural light, again, 5 or 10 minutes at a time, will do wonders to boost people's energy, mood, and again, create a little bit of a reset, enough where you can go back and start the work again. One of the things that I'm against, and I say against, but if you can make it work, you please do it. But the hustle and grind culture, that's not sustainable, and that's not how people are achieving great things. It's when we work hard with a focus and intention, and then we punctuate it with a break or recovery, and then we come back and do it again. That person that does that and can repeat that in 3 or 4 cycles a day, that's the person that's going to make things happen.
So what you're saying is, rather than being at 100% for 8 or 9 hours straight, it's better to, or maybe being at 90% for 8 or 9 hours a day, it's better to maybe try and, go at 95% for an hour or two, take that break, recharge your batteries, and then again, you're going to be able to push maybe higher again. And I can see that myself, because it'll keep you saner, right? That rather than being in this frenzied mode all day long, you need time for you to just kind of be able to think and to recoup yourself.
Yeah, it's, we talk about, working out, and, one of the things that happens with the workout, if I were to take you through a workout, or you to take me through a workout, and you were to lay out the workout, and you say, all right, Eric, for the next hour, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then this, and then this, and that'll take us to the hour. I'd look at you and go, cool. And I'd say, where's the rest, by the way? I heard about what we're going to do. I heard sets and reps and weight and how long and that sort of thing, but I didn't hear about any rest in there. And you'd go, well, there is no rest. And we both would go, okay. And we'd start off and we'd go for it and we'd be doing all right. But there's a point where we hit a point of diminishing returns, where we're just not able to get the last rep or the desired form. We start to deteriorate, and it starts to look all wonky and crazy. And that's the same thing that happens with our work and our productivity. And you're right, you'd be better off pulling the lever back or pushing it forward and going for some solid work. We know that it's about an hour, 75 to 90 minutes is about the sweet spot. After that, people start experiencing diminishing returns, and that's where I would punctuate with a break. Come back from that, work a little more, punctuate with maybe a lunch or again another break, and just repeat those cycles. And you could even go into a form of sprinting, if you will. There's even a more what I want to call it, a tighter timeline you could work with. You don't have to focus on hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. You could simply focus on what are called Pomodoro cycles. A Pomodoro cycle is 25 minutes of work followed by 5 minutes of rest. And a full Pomodoro is 4 of those. So you do 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of rest, and you repeat that 4 times. Next thing you know, you got 2 hours in. But but it's punctuated, every 25 minutes is punctuated by 5 minutes of rest. And I have a lot of people that like to work that way. And they'll make their day up of doing a couple 2-hour blocks of that. And you'd be surprised when you put your head down and go for 25 minutes, what you can get done.
The question then is, what do you do with that 5 minutes? Because I'm sure it's challenging. So you go for 25 minutes and your brain is going, you're in maybe a flow state, but what do you do with that 5 minutes? Because I'm sure it's hard to switch off. And how important is it to switch off, or is it just important just to sit down and, how do you handle that 5 minutes?
You want to do as close to nothing as possible. And you don't want to, the last thing you want to do is start getting caught up into the deep, dank, dark rabbit hole of social media. So you don't want to take that type of break. And you really don't want to invest into too much like a walk or natural sunlight, where you might be pulled into doing 5 minutes feels good. It's a nice day out. Let me walk a little more, because then you derail the cycle that you're in. What you really want to do is kind of look away from the screen, maybe stand up if you've been seated, sit down if you've been standing, and just build the break for that 5 minutes. Just fill it with a little bit of movement, something to drink, just the normal stuff, not get too caught up in anything, good or bad. I mean, we think the walks are good, and they are for most of the people most of the time, but in this kind of Pomodoro cycle, 5 minutes rest, you really want it to be rest. And the science is very promising with this. There's been some, last year, about 18 months ago, there was a study done with 11 participants. And what they did was they put these participants in, was a functional MRI. So it's an MRI tube, but it's just of the brain. And the researchers are able to do certain things to these people and watch their brain activity. And in a functional MRI, the brain lights up, and when it gets very active, it turns into oranges and reds and that sort of thing. So what they wanted to do in this study was see how long it takes to let the brain reset cognitively, so that you can know how long of a break you need to take so you can experience the benefits of being able to go back into it. Is it 5 minutes? Is it going to be less than that? Is it more than that? And so the protocol was, they took 11 participants and they put them in a functional MRI. And they stimulated them. They had TVs on, and you're in the tube, but you can still see a little bit of what's going on. They played music, and they asked them what their favorite music was even, and they played their favorite music, and then they asked them questions and had some math problems to solve. What year is it? Who's the president? All that kind of stuff while all this is going on. And they did that for 5 minutes. They overstimulated. And by the way, the researchers on the other side, looking at the brain scans coming from this, you could just see as the 5 minutes started and all of these things started stimulating the brain just lit up. It went from a cool yellow to a really bright orange to a bright, bright red. Now, one of the things they did before they put them in the tube and started to stimulate them, they had a little puzzle. And it wasn't a Rubik's Cube. I moved my hands like a Rubik's Cube. It wasn't a Rubik's Cube, but they showed the participants how to solve the puzzle. And they let them try it. And the participants were like, okay, cool, I got it. And so they said, okay, so that's going to be part of it. Here we go. Put them in the tube, overstimulate them for 5 minutes. And then what they did was they cut everything off. They cut all the stimulus off, and they gave them that puzzle right away. All 11 participants couldn't solve the problem. They couldn't solve the puzzle. They tried and they tried, and eventually they're like, I can't do it.
Yeah. So
they let everybody cool down and chill out, and they brought them back. Half an hour later, everybody chilled out. They started each participant over again. Same protocol, same thing, same TV show, same music, same line of questions for 5 minutes. Researchers watched the brain light up, but then they did this. They cut it off, and instead of right away giving them the puzzle, they waited 60 seconds. They waited 60 seconds. Exactly at the 60-second, the 1 minute mark, they gave them the puzzle and said, can you solve it now? All 11 solved the puzzle.
Wow.
And the researchers looking at the scans reported that the brain in a minute went from that bright red back into the bright oranges, down into the cool yellows. And it's at that point, about the minute mark, where they gave them that and they were able to solve it. So 5 minutes is wonderful, but you talk about optimizing yourself. Sometimes we're just back to back. We got calls, we got things to do. We got to keep moving and that sort of thing. If you could just give yourself a minute, but it has to be. It has to be. That's very clear in this study. It has to be a minute of nothing. No stimulus. You're pretty much just sitting there and you're just almost that sensory deprivation where you're not looking at anything, you're just kind of quiet, you become really reserved, let that brain cool down, and then you can go right back into it.
And do you try and do anything mentally at that point? You try and, because I know sometimes when I'm thinking about stuff, even if I stop doing whatever work I'm doing, once I stop, my brain is still going. So do people need to think about trying to maybe some kind of meditation or some kind of something to quiet the brain, or is that not as important?
No, that is important. And I have some clients that I've told them to study, and we've kind of experimented with it. And I have some people that do some different things. Some people are more visual, and so some people will put like a sleep mask on when they take that minute. They'll take their glasses off, or just right, if they don't have glasses on, just put that right on and just take that minute. Some people will do better with like earplugs in or white noise during that period of time. So again, some people, kind of identify stronger to visual stimulus or auditory. I have one client that has to put white noise on and an eye mask on, and they can chill out that way. But yeah, you have to be intentional with that. I think in the study, they talked about how just overwhelming the stimulus was. So I think it was a very drastic, overstimulated to almost nothing. And so it was kind of just like in a room, and it was calm and cool and that sort of thing. Most of us are not at that level of stimulus, but I think we still have to be intentional on making sure we're blocking out a lot of the things that are still around us and coming at us.
This is fascinating. I love this stuff. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah.
I'm sure, like myself, a big problem a lot of people have, and probably you hear this a lot, is procrastination, right? Starting something, even though we all have goals, we all have, as a real estate investor myself, I have goals and I know what I want to achieve, but there's, some days where I'll do it later. I don't need to do this today, when I do. But that's what the story that I tell myself. Maybe you can help us with, some tricks and techniques that you help with procrastination.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple things that we can do with procrastination. First of all, the first thing I look for when I'm with an audience, or again with a coaching client, is what type of procrastination are you having? There's different things. Perfectionistic tendency is one. People keep wanting to push everything, and I do mean everything, to perfect, and that comes price. There's stress and overwhelm, but it also, you're focusing. You can only put so much energy and effort and focus towards perfect that other things get neglected. And so you're procrastinating on those things. So identifying perfectionistic tendencies is something that is helpful. And again, the fix might be to step back from that and have a labeling system. I recommend that you label your work, and not necessarily in a way to prioritize, but in a way, it is a prioritizing technique, but in a way to overcome perfectionistic tendencies by labeling things A, B, and C. A's are absolutely going to go to perfection. B's are more in the realm or the world of what you would identify as excellent. And C's are probably more like rough draft or first edition, and we'll edit it up, or we'll make iterations and we'll work it up to maybe a B level, or later maybe perfection. But that's not enough, because when I first started doing this about 15 years ago, I was working with people and I discovered some of this, that labeling it is helpful. But then what happened still is the people that were labeling some things, some A's, and rightfully so, we're still kind of spending their time putting off the B's and C's, working up the perfection things, even if it was only one or two. Mm-hmm. So then I backed up and I said, okay, so now if you label something an A and you're going to move it and work on it to the level of perfection, you have to do two things first. So if you label something or deem something perfect, I got to work this to perfect, you have to identify and discover and clearly outline what perfection looks like. Mm-hmm. What it is going to look like when you arrive at perfect, and the details count. That's the first thing. The second thing I recommend that you do is outline and stick to how long you're going to allow yourself to get there. And I should have known this, because I had my editor of my first book that I wrote in 1996. I got the book done. I sent it to the editor, and she did a beautiful job. I mean, that's what she did. I was very lucky to know her and have her to do this. And she sent it back to me and said, we're good to go. Take a read over it and give it to two other people and have them take a read over it. And then if there's no problem, send it to the publisher. And I did. Everybody got the 2 people I gave it to were back. No, I don't see anything. It's great. Send it off. So she calls me about 3 weeks after I did all that. And she said, how's it going? Have you heard from the publisher yet on the timeline when we're going to have a copy? I can't wait to see it. I said, I haven't sent it yet. She said, oh, why? What's wrong? And I said, well, I'm looking at page 6 and 88 and 144. She goes, okay, I've got page 6 pulled up. What's wrong with it? And I said, well, I'm just kind of, and she said, stop, stop. And I said, what do you mean stop? She goes, what are you doing? What's wrong? And I said, well, I'm just trying to, she goes, you don't even know what you're trying to do you? What are you trying to do with that? And I couldn't articulate, I couldn't explain it to her. And then she said, okay, well, how long are you going to allow yourself to look at page 6 and 88 and 144? And I'm like, well, and I just stammered and stuttered. And she said, close it, save it, and send it. And again, I even though that was early in my career, and I didn't really get into these steps with perfectionistic tendencies until later, that was really my first lesson of that. You need to make sure if you're going to label something perfect, you get a clear picture of what perfection looks like, so you know when you're there. Yeah. And it's important to know how long you have to work it up to that point. And so you can manage your expectations. And that takes the pressure valve off of a lot of the stressors and a lot of the procrastination. And then dealing with the B and C stuff, define excellence. What is excellent? A lot of times we think of these things as, done is better than perfect, progress is better than perfection. So make excellence kind of fit there. And then knowing that you have the C category, where you always have the ability to work it up and to a higher level. And you can always take stuff to an A. You just have to make sure you do those 2 steps. What's it going to look like as perfection? And we'll call it done there. And how much time do I have? So that's one thing that happens with procrastination. The other thing, people try to work without breaking things down into smaller pieces. So you put something whole on your schedule, even if it's 2 hours, or maybe it's going to take 2 days to do it. If it's just 2 big chunks, day 1 and day 2, you're going to look at that and go, no, thanks, and move on to something else. Yeah. And I'm sure people in the audience are going to go, okay, smaller. Yeah, it can happen with smaller things. You can take something and chop it down and look at it, put it on your schedule for 2 hours or 3 hours, and your brain looks at that and goes, no, thanks. It creates a sense of overwhelm. Whereas if we were to break that thing down and not call it one thing, but break it down into 6 pieces and put it into some of those Pomodoros we were talking about, or a chunk here in the morning and a chunk here in the late.
Well, I've lost you for a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Eric?
And one final tip that I kind of the top 3 there.
I lost you there for a second.
Okay.
We were at you. So you fit them into the Pomodoros, so you break it down to 6 chunks. You put it in the Pomodoro, or you put it in where you have those spikes. That's where.
Yeah. So you can break it down, and sometimes for people, breaking it down is enough. But then what I would do is recommend that you take something we talked about earlier and kind of put it into those higher energy cycles, just almost guaranteeing that you're going to be in a good place to get that done. And one of the final tips, a lot of times how we talk to ourselves causes us to procrastinate. Mm-hmm. And so again, you talked about, the story we tell ourselves. A lot of times getting inside of our head, and we try to talk ourselves into doing it. We try to focus on the positive that we're going to get. We try to say, okay, it's going to be great. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it done. But we do more to get out of pain than we do to gain pleasure. And so what I'm suggesting is put yourself into a spot of bother here a little bit. But think of it this way. This is neutral, right? This is the tipping point. Over here is completely into it and doing it. This is not doing it. And this over here is a little bit of pain. So what I recommend to some people that I work with individually, and I've done this with groups too, is pull yourself over here and think about what it's going to cost you. What is the cost of inaction? What is the cost of not taking this thing and doing it right now, or whatever time you're going to schedule it and you approach it? What is going to happen if I don't do it? For a lot of people in the workplace, they start thinking about, well, if I don't do it, I'm going to have to tell my boss. And my boss is going to ask me, well, when are you going to do it? And then they're going to say, okay, then you need to call the client and tell them you didn't get it done. And then you need to figure out how you're going to get it done on the timeline you just told me and the client. And most of the people are like, okay, yeah, you're right. I don't want any of that. And so just sitting there and going, okay, so I'm going to have to tell my boss. My boss is going to make me call the client. It's usually about that time where you go, oh, heck, I'll just do it. It's really putting ourselves into a little bit of, hormesis is just a mild stressor. Hormesis is a mild stressor that is short on duration, and it can be very intense, but the intensity, again, is just a short period of intense stress, and it's enough to prod us and push us into getting things done and taking action. So most people respond to that wiring. There are a few people that don't, so I'll point that out, but most of us, and again, it's not over here. You're not pulling the lever over here where people are going to be so overwhelmed that they're not going to be able to recover, or they're going to experience some form of traumatic burnout. You don't pull the lever back that far and put yourself into a bad spot. You simply just a mild stressor. You kind of run that drill. Like I said, what's it going to cost me if I don't do this? And there's usually a point where you go, oh, heck with it. I may as well just do it right now. Yeah. And so those are the three things that I usually find are kind of at the root cause of some of our procrastination.
Anyone who's, I don't know if I'm on the screen when people watch this video, but the whole time I caught myself, I was like, yeah, as you were talking, because so many of these things that I'm guilty of myself, and I catch myself, because the story and one thing that I'm guilty of is telling myself a story. You'll tell yourself anything to get out of it sometimes, or you'll tell yourself something negative and you don't believe that you can do it or whatever, but it's just what you're telling yourself, and you've got to be so careful with self-talk. Self-talk is something I'm always working on so massively. And I also like the negative thing, the negative. What is the negative of, because a negative can turn into a positive, right? It's like, for me, what I tell myself is, what if I don't do this? Will I reach my goals? Will I build the life that I want? Will I get that freedom that I want? Will I be able to spend more time with my son? Will I be able to spend more time with my wife? And right. When you realize that it's no, well, the cost of doing that task, and just like you pointed out in that example, is so minuscule compared to what you're costing yourself in the long term. It turns out it's a negative positive, right? It's a negative in a positive way.
The messaging we tell ourselves is way more destructive or powerful than something you could give me. You could say something to me right now and it would bother me if it was negative, or it might make me go, okay, that's great, thanks for that. But the story we tell ourselves, so powerful. One of the things that again, talk about optimization, you talk about getting up in the right place. I don't say anymore, I have to get up. Today I had to get up at 2:30. No, I didn't. I needed to be up at 2:30 to be on with my client this morning in the virtual webinar I did. But what I say is I get to get up at 2. Yeah. I get to get up at 2:30. Now, I also work that on the other side to make sure I prioritize sleep. I have to go to bed. Okay. So I'll use that. Again, think about the positive and the negative, exactly what you were saying. The positive is I get to get up. It's an honor to get up. I look forward to it. And that primes my brain and puts it in a good spot. So when my feet hit the floor, I get to get up. It's 2:30, I get to get up. Yeah. But when it's 7:30 and I have to go to bed, I use that again to leverage me into I have to go to bed. And by the way, that equates to positive to me. I've even worked that around where if I go to bed now and I'm going to get the quality and quantity of sleep I need, I'm going to be in a good spot come tomorrow morning. Yeah. But the self-talk, addressing the self-talk, we may as well talk about that if we have the time.
Absolutely, yeah. I have plenty of time if you have time as well.
Yeah, the self-talk thing. I had a problem with self-talk, and I share this story. I don't do a lot of stories about myself, in keynotes and that sort of thing. But this one is one that I have gone from, cradle to grave with, beginning to end with. And when I was doing ultra marathons, I've done 103 triathlons, I've done 6 regular marathons, and I've done 35 ultra marathons. Wow. And so now everybody knows my level of crazy. Everybody's got their thing, right? So that's mine.
That's another level of crazy.
Yeah. And so even having all that background, I started doing triathlons, the swim, bike, and run events in high school back in '83, even before they were a thing, even before they had the popularity that they have now, the worldwide appeal they have now. I was doing them. And I did all those, and I did marathons. And then when I got into ultra marathons, I stumbled across something, and the self-talk was the thing that was causing me problems. I mentioned my background was in exercise science, and I trained myself, and I had access to some very top ultra runners that I worked with and worked out with, and we exchanged information. And so physically preparing myself to run 100 miles or to run a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race and be competitive, which I was always trying to be competitive, set course records, even made an attempt at the American record in 12 hours in a 12-hour event. One of the things I discovered, and I don't mean this to diminish people's effort, I don't want this to be discouraging, but the physical preparedness was not something I ever struggled with. And I always say after that yes, it did hurt, and I still struggled. I got injured, I risked injury. But when it came race day, it wasn't the physical aspects of it that I struggled with. It was the psychological aspects. And I identified very quickly into the ultra running world that was an issue. And you'd come to maybe a hill, and it might be 70 miles, 80 miles into a 100-mile race. And your brain, you felt like I can run that, but your brain would make you rethink that. Better walk it. Don't want to blow up with 20 miles to go. Better be conservative. I don't want to push this hill too much. There might be a problem. And the next thing you know, your brain the self-talk would start telling you, yeah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to mess up. You better walk it, and that sort of thing. But I realized I had the physical wherewithal to do that, but the brain would win. And so I had a friend that was a psychiatrist in Portland, Oregon. And I called him up and I said, I got a problem. And he said, what's the problem? What's going on? And I said, it's these ultra marathons. He said, yeah, you got a problem. That's a lot of miles to run. That's a heck of a long way. And I said, no, it's not that. And I explained the same thing to him. He goes, I get that. He goes, I get that. He said, what exactly is going on inside your head? And I kind of explained that to him. I also explained another scenario that I was running with a guy for first place that had won a race 3 years in a row before this particular race we were in together. And we had about 10K to go, so about 6 miles to go, 6.2 miles to go. And my brain, I was able to stay with him, and I was feeling good. But my brain took over, and the self-talk started. And it started saying things like, who are you? Who are you to run with this guy? He's won it 3 years before. Do you know he holds course records in this race and that race and another race and another race? And the next thing you know, I'm drifting back. I'm falling, but physically I'm checking in going, I still feel good. What's going on here? And it just, it was just a couple feet, and then it was 20 feet. And then of course, at the finish line, it was almost 3/4 of a mile. And so I'm telling my friend, the psychiatrist, this, and he goes, it's the self-talk. It's the negative self-talk that's causing you the problem. And I said, well, how do you fix that? He goes, oh, that's easy. I said, easy? He said, yeah. He said, what you need to do is stop the subconscious part of your brain from picking that up and processing that message. He said, the subconscious part of your brain is very literal, very exact. It doesn't take a joke. It doesn't have a sense of humor. Whatever you tell it, it just helps you carry out. And he said, that's why you started to drift back and you couldn't do anything about it. Even though you had the physical wherewithal and you probably could have right away pulled ahead, that self-talk was overwhelming to you. And it was the only message your brain and then in turn your body was getting. I said, so where's the easy part of this? He said, he said, when that self-talk starts, he said, say something to interrupt it. I said, say something to interrupt it. He said, like water buffalo or purple pickle. I said, are you kidding me? You want me to say water buffalo out loud in a race? He goes, no, not out loud. He goes, you don't have to do that. They'll think you're crazy. He said, on second thought, maybe you should. Imagine running next to that guy and you're screaming, water buffalo. He's look at you and you come off. He said, you don't have to do that. And in all seriousness, he said, you don't have to do that. You just need to interrupt the pattern of that negative self-talk. And so a pattern interrupt, like water buffalo or purple picker or whatever the word might be that you want to use, is enough to make the subconscious brain go, what was that? I didn't get it. I couldn't get that thing you were trying to say, that this guy's so great and you're having trouble running up a hill and you shouldn't do that. You interrupted me. And when you say that, enough, whatever that pattern interrupt is, again, inside your head, you eventually, and it makes sense because self-talk is very normal for us. In fact, my friend, the psychiatrist, said that one of the things they check for a lot of times in people is to make sure there is a self-talk. And it's very normal in stressful situations, both either physical or mental stress, to have higher levels, overwhelming stress or self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, it's not unusual you're having it. It's normal to have self-talk, but he said, watch what happens. Next time you try it, watch what happens. And he was absolutely right. I got into another race. It was the same guy and a couple other guys there. And we were running together. We had about only 3 miles to go this time. I thought this is going to be a good test of this. We've just run 47 miles, 3 miles to go, and it started. And inside my head, I'm going purple pickle, purple pickle, purple pickle. And the next thing you know, it started to beat down the self-talk. The self-talk wasn't so present. It wasn't omnipresent. It wasn't overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And the best part about it was, as he told me what would be the case, is that when you beat the negative self-talk back, since self-talk is a normal thing, and it's a normal thing for your brain to do, in the absence of negative self-talk, guess what happens? The positive comes out in just a little bit of a space. And just doing it for a little bit, you realize that you hear a little cheerleader, like, you got this. Whatever that voice is, whatever that says to you, that can start to come out. And it was the strangest thing. That day was when I started, this has got to be part of this, because this can help other people. And again, it's not about ultra marathons. It's not about athletics or sport or competition at all. It's about being able to peel back the layers and listen to what the self-talk is saying and grab the bull by the horns and maybe the water buffalo by the horns, if you will, water buffalo, purple pickle. What is going to be your pattern interrupt, so that you create a little bit of space in that negative self-talk so that the positive self-talk could come out. And it's at that point when you can leverage a little higher success or a little better outcome for yourself. And I know that was a long story on that, but it's an amazing thing when you try it.
Please tell me you won that race then.
I did. I always say, like, okay, that day was different. I started saying purple pickle, purple pickle. The next thing you know, I was 2 feet ahead, 3 feet ahead. And by the finish line, I was a quarter mile ahead of all of them.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's just a perfect example of it as well. I mentioned that I'm guilty of negative self-talk, I try and say something positive, but I think that's a great example there of what you can do, because once you stop it, it's like you said, it's so in your head. You think worse of yourself than anyone could ever do, I think, and then think more negative thoughts than anyone could even do. And you build stuff up and you build a monster in your head. But if you can just disrupt those patterns, I really can see that just by whatever you decide, by the word or whatever you're going to say, something as ridiculous as water buffalo or purple pickle,
right,
could disrupt it. And that, like you said, we have positive thoughts as well. So if we let that come to the forefront of how we think, it can change completely our behaviors and how we see stuff. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I hope the takeaway is not about the running or the ultras or the sport. It's something that everybody can do in business. We can sit there and work, and we have a bad phone call. We have a meeting that doesn't go well. We don't close a deal, and we start the negative self-talk as we drive away. Don't let it happen. I think after my friend said it's easy, I think the hardest part is checking in with ourselves and listening to the self-talk. I think that's the really hard part, because that's scary. We've got to listen to it and go, ooh, that's ugly up there. And then you create that pattern interrupt. That to me is the hardest part. But that, again, is something everybody can do. And everybody really needs to do it from time to time. Really get in there and go, what's going on up? Oh, that's not good. Create a little space for that cheerleader, that positive self-talk to come out.
Yeah. Great story, by the way. I love that story. I'm glad. I would have been disappointed if you said that you'd lost the race.
That one went my way.
Well, thank you. You shared some great information. Now, obviously, this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate. I'm a former wrestler. So I've got some wrestling themed questions, if you don't mind me asking you that. So the wrestling themed around your business as well. So the first one is a bit of a funny one. What would your wrestling name be? If you had to come up with a wrestling name, what would you come up for yourself as a wrestling name?
Gosh. Oh man. What would my wrestling name be? Big, bold, bad, and bitchin'.
Okay.
Or maybe big, bold, bad, and bitchin'. Something like that. That would work.
Okay, a lot of the B's. Okay, and then
Yeah.
so in wrestling, everyone most wrestlers, they have a special move. So what their strength is. What would your strength be in your business?
Oh, the purple pickle.
Analyzing the self-talk. Yeah, is that your strength?
That's right. Analyzing the self-talk and doing the purple pickle. I'm going to drop a purple pickle on you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Then the purple pickle. I love that. Then what's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your business and maybe your speaking career? Something that's gone wrong. Something that's been a gut punch that has kind of set you back.
Geez. Oh man. The biggest, I had a financial situation that lingered, for quite a while, and I was actively doing something with it, but, again, to spare people the gory and the boring details with it, it was devastating, and I missed the mark on handling it. And bad things happened, and I found out about it 15 minutes before one of the biggest talks that I was doing, probably over a 2-year period, probably one of the biggest talks. And I found out about it about 15 minutes before I had to go on stage and speak to 1,700 construction executives and project managers. And that was huge. That was huge because there was a lot of business in that room. And obviously, with the financial situation that was happening to me, I needed to make sure I had business going forward. And so I needed to do an exceptional job with that group of people. I could not phone it in. I could not say to the meeting planner, I cannot go on. I had to deliver the best talk of my life that day. And I made sure that happened.
How did you, not to get into too much detail, how did you manage to overcome that? Because a lot of people at that point, they would just whimper away and quit or whatever. What techniques did you maybe use to overcome that? Because that's a rough situation.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that I was aware of it and I was trying to address it and trying to handle it. And like I said, I'd been out in front of it, but it just, at that last minute, it just kind of went the other way and we just kind of missed handling it. And I say we, the legal people and the pursuit of handling this just got away from us a little bit. The timeline shortened. One of the things I did, I compartmentalized it. I visualized it just going into a duffel bag. I'm just going to, okay, it's the world. It's the whole thing. It's all I can see. No, it's not. I'm going to pack it up. I'm going to put it in that duffel bag and I'm going to leave it right over there. And as soon as I'm done, I can pick up that duffel bag and take it with me. But for now, I'm just going to shove it in there and it'll be right there for me. So I compartmentalized it. The other thing, talk about, thinking about having to do a good job and thinking positively. I told myself in those 15 minutes that I had, I've got to go out there, Eric. You get to go out there and you get to do the best presentation ever. And that not only is going to make everybody that hired you today and the people in the room walk away with what they need, but you're going to get that business down the road, which you definitely need and you're going to want because you're going to want to keep this thing going. And between those two things, knowing that I put that away and I had that visual of me putting it in the duffel bag and knowing that it wasn't the illusion of security. It wasn't, just like it wasn't real. It was real to me. It was there and I was going to have to pick it up and deal with it. And that was okay, but I had to compartmentalize. I had to put it away for now, but also then focusing on this, you got to do this. This is what you got to do right now. Not only in this moment for the people in the room that are counting on you, but down the road, this is going to come back. This is going to come back on you. You're going to reap rewards off of this later. So I kept myself in that place during the presentation.
Very cool. Very cool. And like you said, you did it, right? You made it through and you made it happen. Yes. So that's awesome.
Yes.
So was there a point in your career that you were standing on the top ropes, getting ready to jump, but you were scared? What was it and how did you overcome it?
Where was that? That would, that would probably, it wouldn't be a business thing. It would probably be one of the ultra things that I had to do in an ultra race. I was faced in a 12-hour race with either going for an American record or not. And I was not in a good place physically. I wasn't, things weren't going sideways, but I was definitely struggling physically. But I was right at that tipping point where I could kind of go either way. Like you said, I was on top of the ropes, and I had the opportunity to jump off and land my signature move, the purple pickle.
Yeah.
And so I did it. But what I did was I just told myself, kind of like the hormesis thing, what is the story of regret going to be? What am I going to tell myself and have to live with if I don't do this right now? I would rather do this right now and hurt and turn myself inside out to do this and fail than I would to say, oh, I just didn't think it was right. It wasn't the time. I wasn't in a good place. And then that would be too much to live with. So I did it. Now I fell short, right. But I did turn myself inside out. I had nothing left at the finish. I completely doled it all the way out. But it was at that moment that, again, I kind of went back to what I told you earlier. I was on the top of the ropes, and I just played that game real quick with myself. What's the cost of inaction going to be? And do I want to live with that? Do I want to tell that story? Do I have to, go down that road every time I think of this? No. And so I went for it.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing so much today. You shared so much great information that I think, for sure, I know I can take a lot away from today's interview, but also a lot of other people. I think me and a lot of people are guilty of procrastination and guilty of, that time management, and not also realizing what type of person am I, right? Am I a morning person? Am I, that intermediate person? Am I evening? And trying to maximize your strengths, right? Is working with yourself rather than working against yourself, and making the best of it.
I'd rather work with myself as much as I can, even down into the later part of the day where I know I'm not at my best. I'd rather work with the theme from Rocky and maybe a little coffee and maybe a walk and some push-ups than I would try to rage against it. I want to bring out my best self. And I think that's where we need to think about. We need to think about, what do I have to do to be my best self every single day, no matter what?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Like I said, it's been great.
Well, it was my pleasure.
Where can anyone get a hold of you? Also, you mention your 4 books as well. I'll put them in the links as well, but include them here, and where everyone can find you, and everything you've got going.
Yeah, my website is my name, so ericherdman.com, and I'm probably the most active on social media. Probably the first place is my Instagram page, and it's just Eric_Herdman. And I'm on there. I post a lot of content, a lot of things that we talked about, a lot of little snippets, that type of thing. And then probably the second place I'm most active is on my LinkedIn. And again, that's just under my name, Eric Herdman.
Okay. And then the 4 books, you said 4 books you've written, right?
Yeah. The first one was Action Speaks Louder Than Failure. And that was the book I told you about. Then I wrote the complete book on managing everything, every task. That was the second one. Then I wrote a book called No, You Suck. And it was at a time in the early 2000s when everybody was complaining about companies and businesses and bosses. And I wrote a book that's with the idea of, no, companies don't suck, bosses don't suck. Organizations and businesses do what they have to do to have a profit. In a capitalistic society, they do certain things. And if you don't like it, fix yourself, because those things aren't going to change. And then the latest book, the one in 2019 I wrote, is called Time, Energy, and Focus.
Time, Energy, and Focus. Cool. I'll put the links to all of that stuff in the description below.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay out the heat. I don't know how hot it is today, but let's try and stay cool.
Yeah, we're having a hot one today, that's for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You are welcome. And I hope that helps some people out there. That's all I really, one of the main reasons I do this is to be of service to people. So go and do.
Fantastic.